Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guests, plural, yes, are Sam Bergman, who serves as a violist, and Susie Park, who serves as first Associate Concertmaster of the Minnesota Orchestra. Sam and Susie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having us. It's great to be here.
Well, it's so great to have you both on the show. I have been honored enough to really be able to know the talent and work of the Minnesota Orchestra so well. Not only are they one of our creative partners, helped us to co-curate this show, but I was able to, of course, do the premiere of my American Rhapsody, deep partnership with Sphinx, the Sphinx Virtuosi, who are just there. And so it's just a lot of extraordinary work going on with the orchestra, which will lead us to really what I wanted to talk about, which is this great work that the orchestra is doing, not just in all of these areas, but specifically with the anti-racist learning project. So I was going to ask you about that. But first, I just wanted to just kind of dial it back a little bit because in this kind of grand scheme of things, orchestras, especially over the past couple of years, have really started to explore more of this work. And I was just wondering, as musicians, if you could just comment on, and obviously the answer to the first part of this is yes, but do you think this work is important? And also why? And the reason why I ask that is that, we've got, viewers from, around the country, around the world, and many of whom are with orchestras and or with other arts institutions. And sometimes they're like, I want to come in, I want to do my work, I want to play my notes, I want to do this, do I want to focus on any of these other things that are not kind of the core thing of, what I did and trained to do and kind of originally maybe joined either my arts institution or orchestra for. So just wanted to kind of start off, this work, do you feel it's important and why?
I think you make a really good point, Aaron, that, everyone is sort of on their own track when they come into the business of being a professional musician. There's so much to it and there's so much personal struggle and everyone's trying to find their own voice. So I think it's understandable that, when people are starting out, maybe they do not have broader issues top of mind. But I think the deeper that you get into this business, the more clear it becomes, especially if you're a musician who's affiliated with a large institution like an orchestra or an opera company, that, we have this absolutely glaring history of centuries of, at the very least, racial inequity, and in many cases, outright racial discrimination. And it's incumbent on all of us, I think, to push against that and to try to create a future that, where we can look back and say, yes, that was a thing that was truly in the past, rather than what I think has often been done, at least in my 25-year career, which is a lot of institutions saying it was in the past and then perpetuating a lot of those same inequities. So to me, that's the core of why the work is important.
Gotcha. Awesome. And so Susie, kind of taking that and leading that into the anti-racist learning project that you're actually doing at Minnesota. Could you kind of share a little of that and also why you were driven to engage with it?
Sure. So the anti-racist learning project that we have co-led for 1 year now basically focuses on works by Black composers of African diaspora that have not been recorded. During my time on the Artistic Advisory Committee for the orchestra, I realized that there were many works that existed and did not have recordings. And so therefore, we as the committee could not listen to these pieces. And that was the process that we were going through in order to program upcoming seasons. And so I realized there was this need for an orchestra to just find these works, get the scores, and record them so that we were able to then hear what they sounded like and assess and see which programs they might be suitable for. And at the same time, I realized this was something that would affect the broader industry, and all orchestras potentially, and around the world even, could access these works and just have them more, at the fingertips, so that then they could enter the canon, as it were.
Yeah, you know what? One of the things that you sometimes hear in this industry, when people start saying, why aren't you making big sweeping programming changes? A lot of the time, orchestras will say, well, it's complicated, and it's tough to explain what's complicated about it. But one of the big complications is not being able to hear pieces that are not already in your regular rotation. And so this thing of not only allowing us to hear the pieces, but also making it possible for other orchestras, other programmers, other institutions to hear them as well. That was a key part of the project. And we were fortunate early on to be able to partner up with Dr. Louise Toppin at the University of Michigan, who is at the head of the new African Diaspora Music Project database. And we've been partnering with them in providing recordings that they can put out to the world free of charge. And the Minnesota Orchestra is covering the cost of making those recordings and putting them out into the world, so that in the case that it's a piece by a living composer, the composer has access to the recording and can do whatever they want with it. But also programmers from other institutions can have free access to look at these pieces and say, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We need to be playing this also.
It's just phenomenal work. And as you both shared, not only a benefit for the Minnesota Orchestra, but also to so many others as they begin to hear these works. So I'm curious, say there's, other orchestras out there who are like, you know what, we want to try and, either replicate or get into some of this work as well. In terms of actually the steps to identify what works to do, kind of that research. Can you just share, how have you gone about that? Is there kind of a, have you just led those efforts, or how do you curate what to actually select and perform? And do you have kind of any criteria that are driving that, and or people out there that are helping you with that?
Yeah, this was a huge chunk of your last year.
Yeah, it's just been really so informative, and it's been a great opportunity to learn just about so much music that I didn't even know existed. I didn't know of so many composers that I now know of. But just, let's see, well, I spent a lot of time online. I did a lot of Googling. I found websites and databases that I'd never come across before. As I delved deeper within all the different composers whose names I'd not come across before, and found, there are these pieces that each of them has written. Some of them I could hear because they had been recorded. Some of them I couldn't, and I couldn't find any recording. And so obviously there is also the issue of trying to get the parts, getting the music. And so with the awesome help of our on-staff librarians, we were able to just use their network of sorts and reach out to whoever might have these parts and scores. Then once we acquired them, we were in the need of figuring out how to select which of the works to actually record. There is the matter of how long they were, what the orchestration was. In the first iteration of the project, we chose to forego any pieces that required a soloist because we thought that just would make things even more complicated. So we stuck to just orchestral works, and then after getting some scores, we worked with our conductor for the past year, Scott Yu, who is obviously good at score reading because that's what he does, and we entrusted him and that skill to ask him which of these pieces he would be interested in conducting and recording with us. So it was very much a team effort. It was a lot of the committee just doing a lot of online research and finding composers' names, and then finding pieces that hadn't been recorded, and then trying to figure out where those parts might be, then figuring that out, and then doing the actual score reading, and then figuring out how would this all fit within the space of 1 week of learning all this music and then recording it. So it was a lot of work.
And there was also a lot of strategic discussion as well, because we weren't just launching a project that we wanted to have a wider impact in the music world. We were launching a project that was specifically for the Minnesota Orchestra. And when you're doing something entirely new, you want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that's going to feel good to the musicians on stage, and that is going to feel, idiomatic to their instruments, and that everyone is going to feel like they're really doing something important. So one of the things that Susie and her committee were really diligent about was looking for a mix of pieces that were going to provide different kinds of challenges, and that were going to be in different styles, that were going to have different playing techniques. So we had everything from, Eleanor Alberga, one of the great composers of our day, based in the UK, her piece Tower, which is an older piece, but had just never been professionally recorded, which has incredibly cool string counterpoint going all over the place, has some solo parts for the principal players. We had, Ulysses Kay's Concerto for Orchestra, which is a sort of classic mid-20th century sound. And then we had Margaret Bond's Montgomery Variations, which is a piece that, from a purely orchestral perspective, is less of a challenge to play, but it is much more of a challenge to listen to because of its subject matter, which is all about the first half of the piece is a depiction of the Montgomery Bus Boycott. And then the second half is a depiction of the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham and the aftermath of that. This is the bombing in 1963 that killed 4 little girls. And that's still an active church. I actually happen to be a former Birmingham resident, and I played concerts in that church, and you can still see the scorch marks from the bombing on the outside of that church. So, a piece like that just grabs you by the throat the moment you hear it, has a whole different impact than something like the K, which is much more just, a music for music's sake sort of piece. It's almost, I don't want to call it clinical, but it's that sort of academic school of composition that was big in the mid-20th century. So Susie and her team chose 5 pieces that really ran the gamut of the last, I would say, 120, 150 years of music. And that really made it, I think that kept people interested, that kept people engaged on stage. And you can hear that in the recordings.
It's absolutely really extraordinary work. And I encourage any in our audience who are thinking about this potentially for their own institutions to, of course, reach out to Sam or Susie and the orchestra to learn more. It's really a wonderful process. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time. I typically always ask of all my guests kind of, when they find themselves in challenging, situations as leaders, because a lot of what the show is about is how to help bring about change, how to help lead institutions in especially work like this. And so I'm curious for both of you, kind of any quick tidbits that you could share about when you hit those challenging times. It could be, oh my gosh, how do we figure out this logistical issue to the initiative, or trying to identify this music or make this selection, or any of these challenges. How do each of you just kind of, what do you call upon that either brings you strength or guidance during some of those tough times?
I mean, that's a big question. And I would say over the last couple of years, everyone in the arts has been going through it in this pandemic, but there have also been opportunities in the pandemic to try new things and to really step on the gas with initiatives that might not have caught fire in a different era. And so I would say 2 of the things that have kept the 2 of us going are, first of all, that knowledge that we had a window, that this was a chance to sort of rip up a lot of the way things had been done and do things a new way. And you can't squander that kind of a crisis. But then also that we weren't trying to do anything alone. That there is a whole team of people at the Minnesota Orchestra working on these issues and working on the inequities of both past and present, and working to create a better future. And we have leaned on each other, which is not to say that we've been under some sort of assault from the outside, but we have definitely leaned on each other as the people trying together to do this work. And nobody is out there trying to be a hero and be the person to stand up and be like, I have led change. No, it's a group effort. And I think that's been really key.
Oh. Susie, did you have anything at all you wanted to add before we close?
I think Sam encapsulated it really beautifully. I think that the spirit of teamwork and collaboration and leaning on each other when we are challenged and find things difficult, I think that's just been such a key point of strength for me personally to lean on. And I think just knowing that there's a whole group of people, of communities, of musicians of color who are out there beyond the state of Minneapolis and Minnesota, who are doing the same kind of work and are endeavoring to do the same kind of work. I think that also gives me a lot of strength to know that it's not just happening here, it should be happening everywhere, and it is. So.
Yeah.
Susie Park and Sam Bergman, you both truly are arts engines who are powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks so much, Aaron.